I have been bound and determined, to get to a point where I am able to create my life. And in order to do that, you have to have a high level of awareness and a high level of willingness to, no matter what, take 100% responsibility for everything in your life.
Hello, I'm Dr. Megan Sprinkle, and this is Vet Life Reimagined. I don't think most people want to be miserable, and the good news is you may have more control over that than you think. Today, we are talking with Dr. Jennifer Edwards. Dr. Jennifer had a slightly different start into vet med. As we talk about her career journey as a general practice veterinarian and practice owner, she shares that we may have more choices than we realize when it comes to making our lives happy. Having sold her practice, she is now a part-time relief vet and life and leadership coach, where she is available for one-on-one and group coaching. In this episode, we talk about elevating our self-awareness and how to avoid being miserable. It may be different than what you expect. So let's dive in with Dr. Jennifer Edwards. When did you know that you wanted to start getting into veterinary medicine?
Into veterinary medicine, actually, my intention when I was in college was to become a clinical psychologist. And I was a senior in college looking at graduate schools. And all of a sudden, one day, I said, I'm going to vet school. I don't know that I ever would have thought of it if I hadn't lived in a town that had a vet school because I was at Virginia Tech. But I had taken a class in animal behavior in the psychology department and loved it. And just one day, it just hit me. And everybody in my life was like, what? Because I didn't have any of the classes that I needed, of course. But I did. I graduated and then I went back undergrad for 2 more years to prepare and went to vet school.
So it was really that class. It wasn't like a person. That was what sparked it.
It was that class, and I don't know, I was walking through the bookstore, the university bookstore, and I saw all of the veterinary medicine books. I just happened to walk by that aisle, and I don't know what it was. It just hit me. It's there's a lot of things in my life that operate that way, where all of a sudden one day it's like, boom, this you're doing this, and
I've just had an apostrophe. Think you mean an epiphany.
it just came to me, and I had never discussed it before. I'd never thought about it before, but it was 100% what I was meant to do. So no regrets.
Perfect. Well, and then you went to Virginia, Maryland for vet school, kind of especially coming in with a very unique perspective, focusing so much on psychology. What was your 4 years of vet school like?
During that time, I really was focused mostly on veterinary medicine. With one, well, I guess that's not 100% true because at that time I was a volunteer for a community crisis center called the Raft. Basically, we were a crisis and suicide hotline for 5 counties, including the county that Virginia Tech was in. And I used to work on the phones, weekends and nights. And then I got to where I would train other volunteers to be on the phones. And in addition to that, when I was in vet school, it was mostly headed up by a very good friend of mine, but she was also starting a pet grief hotline. And because of my experience with psychology and working on the Raft hotline, she, enlisted my help and I helped her with it. But I absolutely give her all the credit because she really headed up that project. But so those actually were two things I did bring in related to, psychological welfare, well-being at that time. But I think I was more focused on vet med and just as was the case since I was a child, just naturally in my life tended to just coach people and understand people, but I wasn't studying it so much at that time.
Okay, now I'm curious. Do you have a fun story from when you're younger, when you started coaching someone?
When I was very young, the one thing that I remember was very funny. I was in high school, and one of my friends was having, as all teenagers do, having some difficulties with her parents. And I should say her parents were having difficulties with her. And I'll never forget her parents came to me to discuss how they should handle my friend.
Wow.
And it was just something that I just naturally understood. things. I don't even know, like, at that time, I wasn't aware or conscious of it, and I just remember talking with her parents and explaining, my friend's perspective and, understanding their perspective and how they might have a conversation, and that's, I think, one of the first times I remember, and I put it in air quotes, coaching somebody, because obviously I was a teenager and I wasn't a coach, but it just kind of started from there. I just always loved it, and I always just, for some reason, understood people.
Since you were kind of sparked by with vet med looking at animal behavior, did you go into vet school thinking that's what you would focus on, like specialize in behavior, or what did you think going in, and did that change at all?
Ironically, no. And and as much as I am so fascinated with human behavior, and not so much our behavior, it's more what I'm fascinated is what's behind the behavior. People focus when somebody's, like we see many times these days, people acting like, not very nice. And people focus on the fact that they're not nice. And I'm always like, what were they thinking? Like, what in that moment? Like, did they think, or were they feeling that made them, like, I'm interested in what's behind it, but at the same time, I've never been into animal behavior and training. I mean, a little bit as a vet, of course, I'd coach my clients around puppy stuff, but I'm like, you have a behavioral issue here. I know somebody who works with behavior. So ironically, it's not so much, it hasn't so much translated into the animals as far as behavior is concerned.
Yeah. So, what did you think your career in vet med would look like?
I think when I came out of school, general practice, at that time, not as many people specialized. I think most people who were specialists at the time worked at schools. There was a couple of specialty practices around, but not like there is today. There was one point, one of my biggest passions over the course of my career has been dentistry. And there was a time I thought, should I maybe go back and try to do a dental residency? And I was just too far into life owning my practice. Like, it would have been too much. But it wasn't a big area of focus for me. I did a lot of extra dental training. I did tons of dentistry. It was on the dental x-ray soapbox, years before everybody had dental x-ray. I'm like, you gotta do dental x-rays. So it's always been a passion, but I don't think at school, my dental training in school was so minimal that that wasn't even on my radar.
Yep.
So
Same with me. I don't think I
yeah,
had any dental going through vet school.
it's crazy.
Now, you mentioned owning your own practice. So, what was the kind of the journey from getting out of vet school to becoming an owner of a practice?
Interestingly, when I graduated, I took a job in Northern Virginia. That's where I moved for the first couple of years. And I actually left that job after 2 weeks. Some things had changed, and I just wasn't going to get the mentoring that I was supposed to be getting. The person who was going to mentor me left abruptly, and all of a sudden I was a new grad. And I was very aware, and I would say this to anybody getting out of vet school, who mentors you your first few years is critical to the doctor that you will become. And I was aware of that, just intuitively. And so I was very determined to make sure I went someplace, that would give me good mentoring. So I left. I actually did relief work for, I think, 3 weeks. As a new grad, I was very open. I'm like, don't put me in surgery. Like, I'm brand new, but people were welcoming. And as a result, I ended up with multiple job offers. Fast forward, when I moved to New Hampshire, I did more relief work. And the reason this is important is because all of that relief work, I got to see so many different ways of doing things early on, ways that I agreed with and ways that I didn't agree with. So I then worked someplace else for 5 years, and then just couldn't let go in my mind of a vision of what I knew practice could be like, as far as quality of care, quality of service, level of integrity, level of care, not just medically, but as far as how animals were treated physically and, tenderly. The practice I worked at, I loved, but it's not like it was for sale. So I decided to start my own. So I did.
When you said you started your own, you said you enjoyed where you were working, but did you Why did you wanna go all the way to owning your own practice? Was that something you felt like was kind of like a natural next step, or there were just a few tweaks that you wanted to add to make it kind of your own and your kind of your dream practice?
Yeah, I had a very clear vision of what I wanted practice to look like for me. And I knew, as much as I loved the practice I was at, it wasn't mine. And, I knew the only way I would ever have that would be to have my own. It wasn't this business drive, it wasn't financial drive. In fact, I was more financially worse off for a very long time after starting my practice. It was more a commitment and a vision to what was possible, that I saw what was possible. And that's what drove me. And I was so laser focused for years on bringing that vision to fruition.
I have not owned a practice, but I can imagine that there are some pros and cons to everything in life, but I could definitely imagine that there's some challenges. Was there a particular vision that you had for this practice that you kind of would wish upon other practices as well? So maybe just like an opportunity to share something that you particularly valued when it came to practicing veterinary medicine.
Gosh, there's so many things. I think some of the biggest things that were part of my vision actually weren't related to the practice of medicine. I definitely had a very strong commitment to thoroughness and consistency and comprehensive care. But for me, bigger than that was around how people were treated, how clients were treated. I am a very big believer, and today I think it's harder. But I think that we have a lot of clients and a lot of them are difficult. And I think today's world is different. I think the level of what clients are now is a whole different ballgame. But back then, this is 2007, I felt that there was a subset of clients that probably were just difficult, and that's just how they live their lives. But that there's probably a lot of people out there that walk in the door with their proverbial arms crossed, like defensive, and they become the difficult client because out there in the world, they experience a lack of integrity, people not honoring their word, people not giving them what they promised, people not calling them back. And so my goal was that they walk in my practice, and I used to tell my staff this, our goal is that when people walk in like this, that they do this, that they can relax, they can let the arms down, they can open, they can trust us. And because we honor our word, like, I was so emphatic about that. You do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And if you can't or you don't, that's okay. You acknowledge it and you restate your intention. So for me, that's the definition of integrity. And it was the driving force behind my practice, to the point where I would explain to people, if Mrs. Smith calls and you say, "Oh, I'll talk to the doctor. Can I call you back in a minute?" That's a figure of speech. But consider, you could have 100 different people listening to that. And some people will say, "I'm going to go on with my day. She might call me tomorrow." But there are some people that literally will sit by their phone because they think you're going to call them in a minute. So just be careful with your word choice. There's no reasonable expectation to actually call somebody in a minute. So just say, "I'll get back to you later," or "I'll get back to you by the end of the day," or "by the end of the day tomorrow." You can't have a disappointment without a prior expectation. So I tried to cultivate a consciousness and awareness around expectations that we set, because if you never set it, you won't have the disappointment. But as a society, that's not what we're used to. We're all used to constantly we say things without really having an awareness of whether we're actually going to honor what we say. And so that was kind of one example of one of my driving philosophies behind my practice that I would teach to my staff. And my hope was also that they brought that out into their lives.
You have said this word a couple times already, and that's awareness. And I think part of it is you are a very aware person yourself. You're very intuitive, but I see how you connect that awareness with a lot of other values from integrity, but also responsibility for our own actions to help hopefully relate better to other people at the same time. So,
No, that's very true. For me, I do have a very high level of self-awareness, and a lot of that has been cultivated over the years. I had some naturally, just like as I shared earlier, but I have been bound and determined, to get to a point where I am able to create my life. And in order to do that, you have to have a high level of awareness and a high level of willingness to, no matter what, take 100% responsibility for everything in your life. And in order to do that, you need awareness. I think a lot of people out there do a lot of things that impact others, and they're not trying to be mean. They're not aware. They're not aware of how what they say lands, they're speaking. They're not aware, especially typing, the big one, because that's
mhm.
even harder. And things get misinterpreted. It is what it is, but you see all over social media the bashing and and just having an awareness of how you show up, having an awareness in the clinic every day when you walk in. What concept I heard years and years ago that really landed was, when I walk out of a room, are the people in that room better or worse for me having been there? And that's something you can just tout off and say, or that's something you can really get real with yourself and answer. Did you walk into the room and just spew your constant complaints upon everybody, or talking about people behind their back, or just being, whatever? Or did you say, maybe these people actually don't need to hear this day in and day out, and maybe talk about something nice? And so, like, what is the impact that you're having? How are you showing up in the world? And it's hard to do it on your own. One of my longtime coaches always would say, Jennifer, you can't see your own eyebrows. And that's why, whether it's, working in taking courses or programs, or working with a coach or a therapist, is allowing other people or other tools to help you see what you can't see on your own. If what you saw and knew right now, and I go in like this because this is how we see things, the answer actually is over here, but you can't see it. If everything you already knew was going to make a difference, it would have already. But people will spend years doing the same things over and over and over. And I'm like, I just don't understand why I can't stay in a relationship. And why I don't understand why everybody at work is always upset with me. So I go to another practice and I go to another practice. And at some point, it's, the common denominator is you, because you keep trying the same things and it's not working. But it's not misintention. It's just lack of awareness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's so funny because I just said a little bit earlier today that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So I think that was kind of right on for this
Yeah.
conversation. And then also just I believe that awareness is something you can learn to do.
Mhm.
And so using those tools that you mentioned about using other people, well, that's feedback. That's asking for feedback. And it's really it can be very uncomfortable. I've also found that being strategic with the people that you ask for feedback can be helpful too. That someone you trust will be both honest but kind. I think no matter how self aware, it never hurts to have an outside perspective, like you said, with the not being able to see your own eyebrows, but unless you're on Zoom, apparently. um,
Oh, exactly.
But yeah, any thoughts around, asking for feedback or maybe other tools that you've seen help people kind of build that awareness muscle?
Yeah. So I think one differentiation that I would offer is internal versus external sources of awareness. We can get feedback from others. Number one, it's difficult. It's scary to ask for feedback, right? Because nobody wants to hear the unpleasant constructive criticism. So if you are asking people for feedback, as you mentioned, I would make sure it's somebody you trust, but making sure that you ask somebody for feedback who's qualified to give you feedback, because your sister might not be the person to give you feedback on how you're talking with clients in the exam room or how you're interacting with your coworkers, right? The other thing, though, with feedback is to be careful of relying on other people's opinions too much, in that everybody's got them, as we all know, and they have their perspective, and and we're all different. For me, when I think about cultivation of awareness, those are the types of things a lot of times that have to come from within. For example, say you have a friend who's not in a great relationship, and you give her feedback, and you're like, he's really not good to you. And she's like, yeah, I know. But, and you're like, no. A week later, you deserve better. You shouldn't be. And she's like, I know. But, this, and but he's this. And you're like, oh, right. And you can keep giving that feedback. And none of it is going to make a difference until one day something, and it might be the 100th time you say it. It might be a podcast she listens to. It might be something she sees on TV, but something happens that she goes, oh my God, I just got it. He's not good to me, is he? And you're like, I've been telling you that for 3 years. Because that moment of awareness, we call that transformation. That moment of, gosh, I've been putting up with this. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you've said it to her, until she gets it for herself, it makes no difference. So I think that it can work both ways. True self-awareness gets cultivated from within. I think other people's opinions can set a stage for where somebody could focus. So if I ask for feedback and I'm told you're a little abrupt with the staff sometimes, I might go, really? I didn't think I was. Then that might be something for me to go off and explore. But I might go, really? Am I? But I don't know why I'm that way. I don't know when are they thinking that? Why? Until I do my own work, and all of a sudden one day I go, oh my gosh, I get it now. When I'm frustrated, I act this way. So I think it can go both ways as far as feedback, but I think true transformational awareness is those aha moments that we get for ourselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like being very intentional about kind of stepping back and reflecting upon things. I am sure that you have seen people that are a little better at internal self awareness than others. So, is there a way to speed up instead of it taking 100 times or a year to come to the to an awareness? Are there any things that you recommend people to start learning how to be better at self awareness?
Well, yes. I think it needs to come from outside training. Again, like whether or not they do programs. I mean, there's a million people out there with programs. They work with a coach. We have everything that we know and that we're aware that we know. Like I know how to write, I know how to read, I know what I know. I also know what I don't know. I don't know how to fly a plane. I don't know how to speak Russian, right? There's a lot of things I don't know. I don't know how to do a fracture repair. That's the realm that people focus. And what they do is they look into this bucket of what I know that I don't know, and they try to move it into what they know that they know. So I don't really know much about communication. I'll read a book. I don't really know like how to have difficult conversations. There's a woman with a podcast, and so they try to just gain more knowledge, and that's helpful to kind of alter your behavior. True awareness, though, is going to be over here in this realm of what you don't know that you don't know. It's not even on your radar. You don't even know that it's a thing until all of a sudden it jumps over here and you go, oh my gosh. And we've all had those moments. We call them aha moments, or the light bulb went off. We've all experienced that. getting there on your own is very difficult because we will only focus on what we know that we don't know. And that's only going to get us so far. So maybe listening to things, but going to programs, working with coaches, therapy, whatever that person's choice is. But before any of that, the number one step has to be a choice, deciding and committing, period. Like that's it. And so if a person is committed to, I want to cultivate my self awareness, and I am committed that I'm going to do that so I can show up every day as the best version of myself. And more than that, be 100% in charge of what my life looks like. They have to make that choice to give up being a victim. And, and again, it's not going to be like you wave a magic wand and it's gone. It takes years of practice, but you have to just stay true to that commitment. That has to come first. And again, that in and of itself takes a level of awareness, because I know this is going to sound weird, but when we're a victim, it makes us really miserable. But at the same time, we get something out of it. And so there's a part of our subconscious that holds on to it. And so to consciously give that up when you don't even know why you're holding on to it, it's very difficult. But I also believe different people to different levels, but awareness is available for everybody. And the more self-aware people are, the more positive impact they will have on the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of all goes together. If you're more self-aware, you're able to know the impact that you have on others. And then when you make the choice to grow a positive impact, then you can choose to not be miserable and do things that are beneficial not only for your well-being but the well-being of others, which I think especially when we start to build good relationships with other people as when we really get to see the amount of happiness that is even possible.
Yeah. And just even having awareness around your own personal reactions and responses. One of the things I feel like has kind of slipped away in a lot of realms is tolerance and understanding and compassion for other people. I feel like as a society, we've gotten to this tendency to judge so quickly. We're just so quick to judge. And we then interpret our judgments as the truth. And then we live into that. And they're usually not very, until we're proven wrong. And then we go, oh, I didn't know. And so I guess I would consider, if somebody comes to work and they're maybe grumpy, or a client comes in and they're grumpy in whatever way, you make up a story. Oh, that person's a jerk, or this person's, if you're going to make up a story, why not just make up a different one? And I used to teach my staff that. I'm like, just make it up. Just the client's being difficult, and just create in your mind that, she just had a family member die. How would who you're being shift if you knew that? Because sometimes we actually find those things out after the fact, and then we go, oh, I feel so bad. I didn't know. Well, what if you just pretended? And even when they're being a jerk, you just come at them with love and kindness and compassion. And I don't mean like people who are being abusive. Like, I'm not talking about tolerating like that level of, but what's so amazing is how often that other person's demeanor will start to shift when you come at them with kindness and compassion for no other reason. It's not the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It's not that you should or shouldn't. You just do it because you choose to. And it can make a huge difference. And your coworkers, just allow people their humanity. Allow somebody to be in a bad mood without then going to your coworkers and saying, can you believe Susie? She's let all that go.
Assume positive intent.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely, I think that has its own power of making you happier and more understanding,
Mhm.
empathetic. And I think you're right. I think you'll find it end up being a little contagious, that people appreciate having some grace, even if they're not physically thinking that maybe. Absolutely.
And I just have to grab that word that you just said is one of my favorite words is grace, not from a religious standpoint, from an energetic standpoint. Like I love the word grace paired with the word ease.
Mm,
And any situation you're in, anything, you know, whether it's a case, a client, a coworker, an employee, a family, whatever, if you just stop in any moment and ask yourself the question, what would it look like right now if I brought just a little bit more grace and ease into this? Just because you choose to, not that you should. What would that look like? And so much is possible. But yeah, just grace and ease. I love
yeah.
that word.
Yeah. So you were owning your own practice. It sounds like you were being a great coach to your team and living out this vision that you had for a practice and the environment. What kind of prompted, and it may be sudden knowing you you had the spark of inspiration, but what was the need for change that you found when it came from going from being a practice owner to what you currently do?
So you mean, why I sold my practice? Yeah. Well, honestly, part of it was one day I was just like, I'm going to sell my practice. It kind of hit me, kind of like going to vet school and many other things in my life. It was 2019. And I had actually been looking for a place to buy to move my practice. And I was going to build out a big, beautiful place and all of that. And then all of a sudden it was just, I just felt done. And I realized, number one, I could a little bit foresee where the profession was going, where society was going. One of my difficulties, I'd say my biggest difficulty in owning a practice was I loved my team. I loved coaching them. We were a family. Hugs, but I struggled when it wasn't like that. So difficult conversations. I wasn't always the best at holding people accountable. I'd be like, well, it's okay. Oh, I know she was late again, but I'll say something, but don't write her up. I feel bad. I don't want to make her feel bad. Like that kind of stuff is not the best managerial skills. And it was kind of like my one little area that I struggled with and gave me a lot of stress because I just didn't want conflict. And then I learned over time to not be that way. And I was more strict, but I just got to a point where I just felt done. And I saw that, I don't know how I didn't know COVID was coming, but I knew something was coming and I knew a lot of things were going to change and it was going to get harder. And I had a vision of the cycle of veterinary medicine. And if I had been maybe 15 years younger, I would have wrote out this how I see the cycle of veterinary medicine is going to go. But at the age that I was and am now, like I didn't want to commit to that long. And so I just felt it was time. It was time for me to be done and to move on. And then to pursue my other lifelong study and passion at that point, honestly, of studying transformation and self-development and spirituality. That's all I'd listen to. That's all I would read. And I'd go to my vet CE and I always made sure I didn't get old school, but that wasn't my passion anymore. This was. And so I sold and then decided to focus on coaching and speaking. And, I got multiple coach training certifications and speaking certifications. And it's just what lights me up. The transitions are hard, but it's also following your path.
Well, I can't help but ask. So, this vision that you had of seeing the cycle of where veterinary medicine is going, do you mind elaborating on that just a little bit on where you see where we are, and then maybe some of your top advice for people that are on this ride?
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
Okay. So I'll share now. Again, keep in mind that nothing I'm about to say is based on any research. It's not the truth. It's just what I kind of see over the years, more and more corporate takeover. And I sold my practice to a corporation. If you had told me 3 or 4 years earlier that I would have sold to a corporation, I would have told you you were absolutely crazy. But I did. And I don't regret it because it just is, it is what it is. It's just the way things were going. And the way I see it happening is corporate, 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 corporate. What's going to happen as a result is focus on money, not, I could talk for a different hour on this and I won't get into it. The whole money thing, we need to focus on money because veterinarians need to earn a living and they should not be justifying that or sorry for that. But a different kind of focus on money and a focus on people as pawns, as I read on Facebook, a lot of people are experiencing in their workplaces. And then what's going to happen as a result is people are burning out. People are going to be more frustrated. Customer service is going to decline. And that's where things will go. It's almost going to kind of go, and then there's going to be those few practices out there that are privately owned, that are focused on customer service, and clients are going to go, oh my gosh, I love them. There's only 3 of them there, but they're so wonderful. And those places are going to start to become successful. And the corporates be like, this isn't working. Or they're going to look and go, what's making them so successful over there? Oh, we have to treat people well in order to make money. And then the level of customer service and the personalized care, I think, will come back. And the analogy I use is the food industry, right? Like I remember back when, TV dinners first came out, and then all like the frozen food, and then all the little farmers all went out of business, and nothing was organic, everything was junk. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Like we're eating all this junk. And we started focusing on health. And now there's all these little farms and organic produce. And it kind of came back the other way. 15 years ago, those little tiny farmers couldn't compete. They couldn't survive. And so I think veterinary medicine is going to come back that way. And like I said, for me, I just was at a point I didn't want to ride out that wave. I just didn't want the time. But my one piece of advice, and I can't emphasize this enough, is to just treat people well and to treat animals well, because that's unfortunately not always a given either in our profession. Whether you're a manager, whether you're an owner, whether you're an associate, just be kind to each other. Just create a work environment that people want to come to. When that tech didn't just hear herself getting talked about and now is giving an injection and she's all upset and like, or mad or sad or whatever she's feeling. And she makes that decimal error because she's not paying attention, or the Labrador that won't get into the kennel. And she's just like, get in there, because she like, that's not necessary. Like, just treat your veterinarians, praise them, appreciate them. Don't make them see an ungodly number of appointments and they can't get home because they're writing records till 10 o'clock. Like, none of that is necessary. And so I think that would be my one piece of advice. And even if you really don't care, which there are people who just don't, okay. From a business success standpoint, staff has become our rate limiting step. I see it everywhere as a relief. Staff are the rate limiting step now. You know, all the doctors in the world, if you don't have the staff to support them, they're not going to be productive. So if for no other reason than productivity, treat people well, you'll have more staff, the clients will be happier, the pets will be happier. It's really a win-win-win-win. And there's just no reason not to. And if you find it hard and you don't know how, that's okay. It's part of being human. And seek help and learn how to be a good leader. Because even as an associate vet, you're a leader. Everybody's a leader. If you're a parent, you're a leader. Everybody's a leader. So cultivate your leadership.
I think that's very good advice. And just because I loved when you said it, I want to be able to say it on the podcast. I liked how you said you decided that miserable was not going to be an option for you. And so you decided to take control and make life happy. And I think that's a great opportunity for people to, in your your circle of control, I firmly believe, because I've talked to a lot of people, you probably have more control than you realize over, what you do. You get to decide on how you look at things and what you believe and interpret things. So I think that's pretty empowering. And so I think that's such a great message.
That point is so, so, so true. People become disempowered, and I mean, that can mean a lot of things. To me, it means that they have given away their power. They have the experience that their power has been taken from them, but the truth is they've given it. And nobody has the power to take your power unless you say so. So I was reading something the other day on one of the groups, and it's like, well, I was forced to stay late, and I had to do this, and I had to take and train all these people, and I had to this, and I had to that, and no, you actually didn't have to. And in retrospect, one of the best ways to take back your power is to look at the past and what you've been dealing with and to own it and to say, I chose to stay till 11 o'clock every night and see all those walk-ins. I chose to train those 4 new grads and not get compensated for it. Because from there, it's not blame. It's not like, oh, so everything's my fault. It's not blame. It's choice and knowing you choose every day. Because when you get that, you chose all that, you are now standing in a position where you can choose what's next. That's what I would emphasize, like big.
Love it. What a great way to end. All right. So I have a final 4 questions for you. What has been your favorite gift you have ever received or gotten yourself?
My favorite gift ever in my entire life has been my daughter.
Oh.
And it's funny because the little sign on the wall behind me, adoption because a family isn't made from blood, it's made from love. And my daughter literally was a gift. And she was adopted at birth. And every single day, she's 13, every day it blows my mind that somebody gave me their child, and she's my soulmate and she's my love. So nothing compares to that.
13. It's a hard age too. So,
Yeah, it's actually with her, it's easier than 11 and 12 were kind of rough.
okay.
She kind of got over some hump of maturity here in the last 6 months. It's like,
Well, good. I am glad
she's a
to
good
hear that for
kid.
you. Uh, 2,
Mhm.
what is a big tip for surviving vet school that you would give vet students?
Okay. So the professors aren't going to probably like me for saying this. And it's been a long time since I've been in vet school. But I will tell you that as far as the quality of veterinarian that you are going to be, A's versus B's is not going to impact that. So if getting a B will allow you to take that night and watch TV with your friends, or to go to the gym or go to the yoga class or go home for a weekend because, whatever, do it, because it doesn't matter. No client is going to ask you if you got A's or got B's. Maybe if you're going for a residency or something that's different, but that would be my one biggest advice. I remember I'm a couples dancer for 20 something years, and I started out with line dancing in vet school. And I
Oh,
remember going out to the local Marriott where they had country night on Tuesday nights. And I sometimes did it. I had an exam. I didn't, so maybe I missed a few questions that I might have got, it never made a difference. But I had fun, and that actually did make a difference. So that would be, you don't have to be perfect. You're better off to take care of yourself than to try to be perfect.
very good advice for life as well. So
Yes.
embrace a little fun. Yes, absolutely. 3rd, is there anything on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Yeah, I want to go on a really amazing spiritual retreat in India.
Ooh, like
But
you
it's
say that
hard. Like
one.
I would need to know where to go because there's so many people out there that, they'll take you on but no, I want something like real, like, with some like really cool guru or monk or something. So I think that's a big bucket list thing for me is to just visit some incredible sacred places with really highly evolved people that I could absorb some of what they've got.
Well, when you've done it once yourself and even maybe before, but it would be so neat for you to take a group of people, maybe even in vet med, and do like a retreat together. That would be really neat.
I actually am.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So actually in February of 2024, February 11th to the 18th, I am hosting a wellness retreat in Costa Rica.
Ooh.
I'm very excited and there's going to be monkeys and hikes to waterfalls, and we're going to do 2 hours a day. I'm going to bring in meditation, and we're going to talk about energy and leadership, energy leadership, and your commitments and your values, and like how to work through all of that. So it's going to be a transformational event, and we're going to have a lot of fun on boats and everything as well.
Well, that was completely unintentional. So I'm so glad I set you up for that. That sounds, is it still available for people to sign up?
Yes, yes, it
All
is. So
right.
anybody can reach out to me. Registration's not open yet, but I'm compiling a list of people who are interested. So definitely my website's drjenniferedwards.com, so they can reach out to me.
Well, perfect. We will make sure that all the resources and links are available in the description so people can sign up. I definitely want to go check that out. So, thank you
Great.
so much for sharing your time with us and giving a lot of wisdom. I think you really have provided a very empowering message for people to take control and find their happy. So, I just want to thank you so much for what you do and giving back to the veterinary profession.
Thank you. And I want to thank you because after our first call, I was so impressed with your level of passion and your level of commitment to your podcast and to your work and the message you're bringing to let people know what's possible. That so much more is possible than what they probably realize. So thank you.
Hey, thank you for watching Vet Life Reimagined. This is still a growing channel on YouTube, so liking the video, subscribing to the channel, leaving comments, and sharing the show all go a long, long way right now, and it is all seen and appreciated.